covers the Eagles for ESPN, ESPN.com. He's on the Comcast Business Hotline. It's the great Tim McManus. Hello, Timmy.
What's up, Mike? How you doing, man?
Fantastic. All right, Tim, let's I understand that A.J. Brown was on the practice field today, as was Lane Johnson. So what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so a little bit of eye-popping news today as you see that the number one wide receiver and Johnson are both back on the practice field. And so with Johnson, he's still in the concussion protocol, Mike, and but he's obviously advancing. So we've seen him the past couple days be out on the field but without a helmet alongside the offensive line, doing some of the early conditioning, and then he ends up being a non-participant. Today was different in the fact that he had his helmet on at the start of practice, and the last phase of a five-step concussion protocol program is that you need to have like that full practice and then afterwards not have any symptoms, and then independent neurologist clears you and you're good to go. So it looks like he's right at like the end stages of the protocol, which gives some hope at least that he can be available for Sunday's game at Tampa Bay. And then with A.J. Brown, this is the first time that we have seen him since he injured that hamstring. It doesn't guarantee that he's going to be on the field on Sunday, but at least offers a possibility, right? I mean, he's not going out there for nothing. He's out there. He was stretching early. He had his helmet with him, and he's at least ramping up. And so we'll see what the Eagles ultimately decide to do. Do they feel like the hamstring's good and he can play on Sunday? Do they wait through the bye just to have that extra set of precautionary measure? I mean, that's something that we'll figure out as we go along. But, it's obviously a positive development to see both of those guys out there.
What's your feel on both of those players or either one of them playing?
So it's hard to give a feel for somebody in protocol because,
you're not an independent neurologist.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I play one on TV sometimes, but so it's really hard to say. But it does seem like he's progressing well. So I would, at first I'm like, well, it's hard to clear the protocol in 1 week, but now the signs that we've seen offer a glimpse that he might be playing. And then with Brown, I think they're just going to continue to test it right up to game time.
Okay, so let's look at this game here because Tampa Bay got housed last week by kind of a bad football team. And the quarterback was terrible, and he's gotten sacked like crazy. Not that the Eagles sack anybody, but we know what's going to happen to this game. They're probably going to blitz Jalen Hurts. He's been better against the blitz, and the Eagles, I would think, as depleted as they are, would continue to try to run the football against a defense that's poorly rated against the run. How do you see it?
I think you lay it out there well. I mean, the Bucs, just generally speaking, like to blitz under Todd Bowles. Going back to last year, they've blitzed on like 30% of the defensive snaps. It's among the top three in the NFL. So that's kind of Todd Bowles' nature. And you couple that with the fact that Hurts has had a really hard time against Tampa Bay. So he's 1-3 lifetime. The 3 losses are tied for the most that he has against any single opponent in the NFL. And that's not even a division team. The Cowboys are the other team that he has 3 losses against. So it just kind of shows you the struggles. And we know that 2 of those losses came at Raymond James Stadium in playoff games, and highlighted by, the final piece of the collapse last year where Bowles just sent the house and the Eagles and Hurts had no answer for it. But Hurts has been working really hard under a new offensive coordinator and Kellen Moore to get the answers. I think that he has better answers for the blitz this year in terms of hot reads and things of that nature. He's taken over control of pre-snap diagnosis, so that he's putting, the offensive line in the right position for protections, and it's worked pretty well. Like his QBR, his quarterback rating number, has gone up 30 points against the blitz this year compared to last year. So it's pretty clear that he's becoming more effective in that. And yes, whether A.J. Brown plays or not, I think that you give them to sort of counteract the blitz. You give them a heavy dose of Saquon Barkley. Why not? It's working pretty well.
Yeah, that's my next question. Because the heavy dose, there is a risk of wearing out a guy. I know he's a big, strong guy, but last week they reduced some carries. He had 18 last week. Are we worried about overuse for Saquon?
Yeah, he's got that injury history. So, personally, do I think it's something that needs to be monitored? Definitely. when you talk to Barkley, his response is, that's why I train the way that I train in the off season, is to be able to endure that kind of stuff. And when you listen to Sirianni talk, it's about like, we're going to do anything that we can to win the game. And if that means giving the Barkley the ball however many times, we're going to do it. So that's at least their mentality right now. But yeah, I mean, you're hitting on something I think that's pretty important, because this obviously isn't about the first 4 weeks of a season. It's about, can you keep one of your premier players healthy as you get into January football? And that's something, given his history, that needs to be a consideration.
So, Tim, we're talking a lot about the health of the Eagles, but let's take a look at the health of the Tampa Bay Bucks. It was just announced that Todd Bowles ruled out Antoine Winfield Jr. and Kalijah Kancey for this game. How big of a loss is that for the Bucks?
Winfield's a big one, not just because he's such a good player, but also because of the way that Hurts has been victimized by veteran safeties over the first 3 weeks. I mean, you think about his interceptions. I mean, it's Xavier McKinney, and it's Jesse Bates, and it's Tyrann Mathieu. And those are the guys that have bit him. And Winfield is right up there. And so that's significant. That's significant. The other part that is on a positive side for the Bucs is that Vita Vea has been participating, at least in a limited capacity, over the first few days of practice here. And so if he's present, that makes a big difference in their run-stopping ability. So if we're looking at, will Saquon Barkley pop off, Vita Vea will have a lot to say about that. And it totally changes the construct up front for the Bucs. So that's one to monitor as we get closer in. We'll see what what he's designated as when the report comes out a little bit later today. But that's definitely one to circle. Is Vea in the middle of that defense? It makes a big difference.
Tim, I have to ask you this, because people are talking about it since Reddick came out and said he wouldn't mind going back to the Eagles. And this Rich Cimini, who covers the Jets, said it heard it from a little birdie. Take it for what it's worth, that Reddick is so frustrated he wouldn't mind being traded back to the Eagles. Now, I don't know what the little birdie, where he comes from, but is this even a possibility that the Eagles now say the Huff thing didn't work out? Well, we're going to pay him $15 million to come back for at least the rest of this 1 year.
So I know Cimini and his work, and he's awesome. So like if he's saying it, he's heard it, and I think that's believable. That Reddick, in a frustrated state, if nothing seems to be happening on the York side, that he would welcome a different option. Then there's the other question: is like, all right, well, is that something that works from the Eagles' perspective? So it's not something that I'm banking on, Mike. But the fact that it's being entertained kind of speaks to a larger problem for me. And that's obviously that the edge rush is an issue here. When Bryce Huff, when you see that his snaps continue to get reduced, and even when he's just sort of trending towards a pass rush specialist, which is what he was in New York and was very effective at it, but hasn't had that same level of impact here, you can tell that he's going through it. He's adjusting to a new scheme, and clearly he's not hitting on all cylinders right now. You're asking a guy, Brandon Graham, to take his place, and Graham's been great. But, if you look at his snap count, he's 36 years old. And his snap count right now, he's playing 53% of the snaps. And you have to go all the way back to the 2020 season to find a time that he had that kind of workload on him. Which is to say, like, is it sustainable? Like, it's a really good story. Graham's been awesome, but, like, I don't know that holds up. So if Huff doesn't come through, Roseman is going to have to make a move. And, Reddick will be a hot name because of his ties here. Maybe they find a way to get creative and make it happen. I'm not banking on that, but,
Well, what would it take, Tim? What would it take? Give me a hypothetical. Would they have to give away a couple draft picks? Do they have the money to pay him? Like, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to – it sort of depends on the state of affairs and what New York would be asking. I have to dig into that a little bit more to see what would resolve it. Do you just kind of reverse swap things? Would there be – and Cimini mentioned this on his podcast too, like, would you figure out a way for Huff to go back and Reddick to come here? And then you just sort of do it that way. So I don't know exactly what it would take at this point. I'll start digging into it to see if there's anything real about it. But
sounds good.
yeah, right now I'm not thinking of it as like a realistic option.
Okay.
All right, Tim, I got one more for you. So Mike has accused me of just being a Baker Mayfield hater because I do not think Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback. I don't think he's ever been a great quarterback. What's your take on the Baker Mayfield situation in Tampa Bay?
I think he's a hot hitting quarterback is the way that I would put it. There are stretches where he looks like that top pick, and then there's also times where he can go ice cold on you. I think that he is equipped with some really good wide receiver power, so that obviously helps. Like if you have Chris Godwin lining up in the slot and you got Mike Evans on the outside, that's going to help your chances quite a bit. And it seems like he has settled into a system in Tampa Bay that's been more conducive than other spots. So I guess the best way to answer it is that he's not a quarterback that I take lightly. So he's not somebody that I'm going to put into the Hall of Fame, but he's not or the upper echelon. But he is somebody that's like, on a given day, if you don't apply pressure, then he's somebody that can end up biting you. And so one matchup to really sort of lock in on in this game is Godwin in the slot and how the Eagles respond to that. Obviously, the way that they've been doing it so far is Quinyon Mitchell has been out on the outside. They've had Avonte Maddox line up in the nickel, and that's worked generally okay for them. But now, if Godwin is such a threat, does Vic Fangio start thinking about, do I move Mitchell in for this game and have him follow it a little bit? But either way, Godwin's somebody who can mess this whole recipe up for the Eagles, and that's obviously a big benefit to Mayfield.
All right, Tim, the moment of truth. Are you feeling the Eagles this weekend?
The whole Johnson Brown thing changes the calculus. Coming into today, I was leaning Tampa. I think I'm going to stay that way, but I think it's going to be close, man. I think it's going to be a close game. But if we look at it as a whole, Philadelphia walking out at 2-2 at the bye, given the injuries that they've had, maybe they're set up for a little bit of a run after that. But until Jalen Hurts proves that he's got a solution for Todd Bowles, I think that we have to trust our eyes and say that it could end up being a bit of a slog on offense for Philly.
I gotcha. Timmy McMahon, it's always a pleasure, brother. We'll talk to you.